The Pneuma of Charlie Kirk, miasma, warfare, and the sovereignty of breath. This is the night sermon. This is the final sermon. Temple of Zucca. I am Abe Zucca. You can check out my art at zuccagallery.com. You can come into my gallery at 1301 Grand Avenue. This is a continuation of a prior project called Fractal Islam, an even more prior project called The Closed System of Stalin, or Stalin's Closed System of Colossus, and an even more prior project called The Unborn Levels of Scientology. I am Abe Zucca. These are my writings. These are my readings. This is all my work. Please like, subscribe. My YouTube channel is small, but it will only get bigger. So here we are. Let's begin. The somatic fever. The somatic fever. Chaos bodies. Qigong deviations in the late socialist imagination. All medicine is politics. Whole communities suddenly fix their minds upon one object and go mad in its pursuit. Qigong is a treasure house of China. The unbound body. The body becomes unbound when social order can no longer contain the intensities that gather beneath its surface. And Qigong deviations emerge at precisely the moment when discipline, rhythm, and psychic scaffolding of everyday life lose their ability to coordinate the individual with the collective. Yet in this unbinding, the body does not simply malfunction, but becomes a stage upon which contradictory political, spiritual, economic forces erupt into gesture, tremors, ecstasies, and collapses. Alexa, lower the volume. Alexa, lower the volume. When limbs fail uncontrollably and voices speak in registers the individual cannot recognize, it is not merely a neurological misfire, but a somatic theater in which state ideology, spiritual aspiration, familiar fatigue, and the hunger for meaning all fight for possession of the same flesh, and the afflicted body becomes the unwilling medium for negotiations between order and disruption. The satiety has not yet resolved. The breakdown of bodily control, whether terror-induced paralysis or manic omnipotence, reveals that the boundaries between self-regulation and spiritual possession are culturally scripted rather than biologically fixed, and that the same practice, breathwork, visualization, fasting, can lead either to tranquility or collapse depending on social ecologies that envelope the individual. When Qigong deviations is pathologized, it is because the self has failed to remain legible within the repertoire of bodily comportments the state requires, and the deviation signals not only internal derangement, but a refusal, performed or involuntarily, to maintain the social responsibilities that constitute citizenship. Are you bots? Do bots say hi, hello? Is that what a bot does? A robot says hello, hi. Is there any other words robots speak besides hi, hello? Cosmic conspiration. The breath as cosmic architecture. Breath appears first not as fragile as the fragile gasp of individual creatures, but as the original grammar of the cosmos itself. For before beings came to breathe separately, the world exhaled as one animal, and this primal respiration structured the heavens, the fiery ether, and the terrestrial below through a rhythm of contraction and release, whose pulses gave rise to both matter and sense. And because the earliest philosophers perceived no true boundary between life and the world, cosmic breathing was not metaphor but ontology, a literal account of how the universe moved, cohered, and held its shape. The Stoics, inheriting the ancestral intuition, forged breath, pneuma, into the tensile medium that threads fire and air, body and soul, cosmos and mortal, holding all things together by a dynamic equilibrium of outward expansion and inward tension. And by doing so, they place breathing at the heart of metaphysics, making respiration the engine of unity across or otherwise fractured and volatile multiplicity. For them, breath was not passive but architectonic, the physioclastic intelligence that both permeated and commands the material continuum. Thus, conspiration first names the deep structure by which all parts of the world breathe together in coordinated tension, and only secondary the shared inhalation of humans standing side by side. And because this concept refers to principles that bind stars, planets, and bodies into one co-sustaining organism, the breath becomes the most democratic of cosmic forces, equally possessed by gods, mortals, and the stellar animals that populate the heavens. In this way, respiration becomes the quiet proof that the universe is not a scattered heap, but a symphonic living being. Alexa, volume louder. Axioms of the pneuma and the unity of all things. The great respiratory machine. Tension and conspiration cooperated as inseparable siblings. Tension provides the vertical integrity by which substances remain coherent, and conspiration furnishes the horizontal reciprocity by which each part supports the others, so that even the smallest organism participates in the cosmic choreography of inhalation and exhalation. To breathe is therefore to align oneself with the world's architecture, an ethical act disguised as physiological necessity. Stoic cosmology teaches that breathing descends from above, the divine fire-air continuum impressing the pulse upon the lower realms, and that all terrestrial life merely responds to the initiative of the heavens, becoming, as it were, the echo or secondary wave of a divine respiration. And because this breath flows downwards into a hierarchy of vitality, the cosmos becomes an asymmetrical organism, yet one whose asymmetry sustains both order and life. In this downward motion, the mortality of creatures is revealed as participation in a larger imperishable respiration. Pythagorean harmonia and the co-breathing of the spheres. The post-Hellenistic Pythagoreans, reinterpreting archaic doctrines through a new metaphysical lens, extended the idea of harmonious breathing from the universe to all its constituents, teaching that each star, planet, and human being maintains its proper course by conspiring with the cosmos, breathing along the currents that emanate from the world's soul. Under this view, each life form is a small instrument in the celestial orchestra, following the melodic line assigned by cosmic necessity. He pushes it farther, suggesting that animals, stellar and terrestrial alike, are bound to the world by a rhythmic attunement that is both necessary and best, so that the act of breathing becomes a submission to the pre-existent cosmic path, a surrender that dissolves individual agency into universal flow. This life is not self-originating, but a continual act of receiving and returning the breath of the cosmos. In this doctrine, to breathe is already to obey. The Hippocratic sympathy in the early medical imaginary. Though Galen ascribes one conflux, one conspiration, one sympathy to Hippocrates, the Hippocratic corpus likely reflects later Stoic influences, revealing how medical thought became interwoven with philosophical cosmology. Yet the aphoristical style on nutrients preserves the sense that life depends on a universal circulation, a mutual flowing together of parts, rhythms, and forces. Thus, early medicine understood the body not as isolated, but as a miniature cosmos whose survival depends on resonant integration. The slow, resonant body, carbon dioxide, coherence, and the ancient prayer of breath. The slow pulse. To breathe slowly is to contradict the modern nervous system at its most frantic edge, because slow breathing undermines every reflex of panic and urgency. The body has learned from chronic stress, and in doing so invites the organism back into the primordial tempo in which life first recognized itself as life. Slowness in breathing is thus not a retreat, but a recalibration, returning the body to its native measurement, where the heart, lungs, and vessels speak again in language older than fear. I'm reading right here on the cover. It says what I'm reading. It is a book written by me called The Pneuma of Charlie Kirk, Miasma, Warfare, and the Sovereignty of Breath. This is the last part of the book. If you care about the book, you can check out my website, zuccagallery.com. You can see my artwork. If you're in Phoenix, you can check out my art gallery at 1301 Grand. Google the name Abe Zucca. My YouTube channel sucks. Has just bots on it. And people ask me questions like, what are you reading, when you could just look at the video. Carbon dioxide is the hidden organ of life. Carbon dioxide, long maligned as waste, emerges as the secret architect of metabolic intelligence, the quiet conductor guiding hemoglobin to relinquish its oxygen precisely where energy is needed, and thereby proving itself not as poison but as the very grammar of cellular generosity. Because of this, every shallow breath is a small betrayal of the body's inner economy, depriving muscles and tissues of the key that unlocks oxygen's release. Overbreathing sabotages this delicate architecture, purging the carbon dioxide that muscles rely upon to summon oxygen into their depths, so that every panicked inhalation strips the tissues of the very fuel it seeks to provide. Thus, hyperventilation is not excess energy, but a form of internal exile, severing the alliance between breath and blood. Tubular labyrinth, the body as 1,500 miles of breath. The body, a sprawling cathedral of tubes extending from New York to Key West, reveals through its architecture that breathing is not a surface act, but a pilgrimage. Each molecule of air journeys through the bronchi, bronchioles, and into the alveolar bulbs, where exchange becomes communion. In these 500 million alveolar chapels, oxygen and carbon dioxide meet like pilgrims exchanging offerings at the thresholds of transformation. Hemoglobin, with its fourfold chambers and 1 billion entrances per red blood cell, is less a transporter than a floating monastery of respiration, receiving and releasing passengers according to invisible structures, encoded in acidity, temperature, and carbon dioxide concentration. Breathing slowly allows the entire river fleet of red blood cells to perform their work with precision rather than haste, gliding through the capillary narrows in perfect time. Because weight loss itself is an exhalation, the body's fat departing, not in sweat but in clouds of carbon dioxide. The lungs are not merely instruments of survival but engines of metabolic fire, releasing the mass of past meals with each breath. The body burns by breathing, and the slowness of breath determines the steadiness of that inner flame. Physiological coherence, the 5.5 breath cosmology. At 5.5 breaths per minute, the body enters a rare coherence in which heart rate, blood flow, nervous system, oscillations, and respiratory rhythms synchronize into a single undulating wave, revealing that the organism, when allowed its rightful tempo, becomes a resonant instrument rather than a noisy collection of parts. The coherence is not mystical but mechanical, yet its effects on consciousness is indistinguishable from revelation. The chanting of Om, the Rosary, Buddhist mantras, Native American song, Taoist intonations, and African prayer breaths all converge upon the same 5 to 6 second inhalation and exhalation, suggesting that the ancient cultures discovered through devotion what physiology would later measure. That prayer works because breath works. Thus sacredness arises not only from meaning but from rhythm. The fact that every tradition stumbled upon the same resonant frequency implies that slowness is not an invention but a discovery, an entrainment to the body's natural cardiovascular oscillation. The Mayer wave, which itself is a relic of primordial animal timing. In this sense, to breathe at 5.5 is to borrow the pulse of the universe hidden in our vasculature. Stress, panic, and the redemption of air. When Henderson's dogs descended into panic while mildly overbreathing, it was not because their lungs were empty, but because their blood was starved of carbon dioxide, leading their heart into frantic arrhythmia and their minds into confusion. And when their breathing slowed, their bodies melted instantly into peace. From this, we learn that panic is often not emotional but chemical, a deficit of the very gas we are taught to fear. Humans, too, live in a chronic state of subtle hyperventilation through stress, mouth breathing, anxiety, and cultural habits, and thus inhabit a biochemical landscape of lightheadedness, irritability, constriction, and misinterpreted signals. Slow breathing is therefore not merely a technique, but a reversal of an inherited cultural dysfunction. Because oxygen rarely limits us, but carbon dioxide almost always does, every fast breath is a drift towards instability, while every slow breath is a migration towards self-integration. Thus, the pace of respiration becomes a surrogate for the pace of thought, emotion, and perception. Slowness rescues the mind from its own velocity. Self-experimentation, knowledge gaps, and the new pneumatics. Obsessive self-experimentation has movement from software wealth into minimalistic devotion. Exemplify the ancient figure of the breathing sage, one who turns his body into a laboratory to reveal the forgotten truth. The physiology is a dialogue rather than a machine. His carbon dioxide tanks, his oximeters, his blood gas charts becomes the modern equivalent of ascetic tools, instruments of secular enlightenment. Science's historical neglect of the respiratory muscles, caught between anatomy and physiology, demonstrates how modern knowledge can overlook what is most intimate, that breathing is a muscular art requiring training, attention, and technique, and that strength in these hidden tissues determines our resilience. The diaphragm is the forgotten center of the human being. Respiration research has historically cataloged pathology, but rarely examined prevention, so that we know how breathing fails, but seldom how it thrives. Slow breathing reorients the field towards an affirmative science, one that studies the conditions of flourishing rather than the mechanics of collapse. That's the end of the night sermon. Check out my art at zuccagallery.com. Come into my gallery at 1301 Grand Ave. I will see you guys later.